Hello, 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 interwebs. Um, so today we're going to be working on some candle making. If we have time, we'll also do some diamond art, I think. Tonight we're going to be making jasmine scented candles. I'm hoping for 3 to 4 of them. Ugh. I am a hot boy. Luckily, Nicole had food in her mouth. No, they gave me a filling. And then they're going to take that one on the bottom. That's the appointment that I set. You said it, when was it for? Sometime in September, I believe. I see it. Endo? Yeah. Endoscop or something. What? Don't look at me like that. An endoscopy? Something like that. Put a scope down your throat? No. I don't know. I don't know what she said. It started with endo. That's why I put endo. There's nothing more. Endo just means inside. Oh. Inside of what? Because they didn't do it today because they were like, oh, we don't have enough time for that. Whose fault is that? Well, they said that because I told them I had to be heading out at 4:30. No, they didn't. I was very frustrated. And then she says, we're almost done, and then goes back in with the burr. That's when I told you, just go. Yes, I was texting you while they were in my mouth. Didn't bother me none. I don't want the remnants of the purple from when I made my lavender candles. So we're cleaning the color out of the pan. Then you hope what? I do. You would have never left me if you had your choice. I already know that. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is put this in, let this melt down to the 185. We're at 6.53 ounces. Then I'll have to measure out what extra I add. And hopefully it's not too much for the 4 candles I'm making. I also have not decided on a color, so I'm thinking I'm going to use a little bit of... Ugh. I'm sweating. The heat, though. I do have the fan on. It's just on really low. The kid took the plate for it. Now I don't know where it is, and every time I pick it up, they try to fall out on me. Frustrating. That's kind of why I snapped at him that he needs to keep his hands to himself when he was all up in this stuff. It's like, just don't. So the first bag of soy wax is down. I want to try the next time I buy stuff for candles, when I buy the oils and stuff. I want to try paraffin, but I really want to try beeswax because of what I've read about it. It's like $10 for 2 pounds. It's a little more pricey than like the soy wax or the paraffin. If you go from most expensive to least, from what I've seen on Amazon, beeswax is most expensive. Then you've got paraffin. Then you've got soy, which I have soy stuff that I'm working with. That's why I said I want to try the other two. See if, but I did read that you have to buy your wicks for the type of wax you're doing. It matters.
I'm sure they have different melting points.
Mm-hmm.
Why that matters? What do they normally make wigs out of?
I think from what I read, it's more having to do with that, like, they're all string basically at the center of them, but they're all coated in the wax that you're wanting to use. Like you said, they'd have different melting points. So the wick would just burn too quick or too slow for the kind of wax you were looking for if you don't have the right one for that wax, if that makes sense. Oh, where's my mouse? My mouse.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Mama knows your games.
Play up again.
Really?
Yeah.
Kid? Troublemaker. I have a super long spoon for the wax. So I'm seeing around the edges we're getting some meltage. Now I can put up my scale. Watching you, watching me. Gotta choose a color for the jasmine. We're gonna go with a pink. And then we're gonna take one of my shaving knives, as in I use it to shave because it was already. doing this so that it melts. From what the times that I've experimented so far, this stuff does not like melting. And so, because he's used to you being gone when I stream. I was gonna ask your opinion, but I don't need it no more.
Fine.
I was gonna ask you what color to. Let's see if you go with the same color as me. Of the following colors, which would you put with the jasmine? Royal blue, pink, brilliant yellow, orange, lemon yellow, light green, fresh green, bright green, fresh red.
I go with green. Was I right?
No.
What color?
Pink. Yeah, because the labels on it are pink.
I guess.
The labels on the oil, on both of them, are pink. So, yeah, I did pink.
White flower.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, too late. I already shaved it up, so it's being pink.
Oh no, hold on. Maybe they do have pink. Yeah, they make pink. I see you.
So while we wait for that to go on, I'm going to put on our video list. We're starting with a Star Wars theory video because I've been wanting to watch this for days and I've kept it for stream. So that's what we're going to start off with tonight. Like normal, I've put the playlist in the description. Go and subscribe and support the creators we're reacting to. The ticker on the bottom when I change the screen, which here, let's just do that here. The ticker on the next to now playing will say a few warnings, and then we'll be listing the channel and the video names. The playlist is also in that scroll bar playing right now. So yeah, we're gonna react. This first one is "What if the Force revives Satel Shan?" For those of you who don't know, from Knights of the Old Republic, and sent her to episode 1.
What if the Force revived Satil Shan and sent her to episode 1? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. If you enjoy deep dives into Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, check out our sister channels, Half-Blood Theorist and Three-Eyed Theorist. Links in the description.
Mindful of your feelings.
Your thoughts dwell on your mother.
I miss her.
Afraid to lose her, I think.
What does that got to do with anything?
Everything. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. I sense...
The members of the Jedi Council exchange silent glances, each one arriving at the same conclusion without speaking a word. The boy is undeniably gifted. His connection to the Force borders on extraordinary, yet that does not erase the circumstances surrounding his arrival. He is already far older than
I have
most
no
initiates.
idea,
He
and
has
I don't
lived
know
outside
why
the Order, formed attachments, and experienced a life the Jedi cannot simply ask him to forget. His attachment to his mother, Shmi, is natural, so asking him to abandon the only family he's ever known may prove impossible.
Oh!
By the time Anakin leaves the council chamber, their decision has already been made. Training him would be too difficult. Before they can summon Qui-Gon Jinn back to deliver their verdict, the chamber doors slide open. A temple guard rushes in, breathing heavily before snapping to attention. He delivers news of someone who has suddenly arrived at the temple and has a Force presence unlike anything he's ever experienced. She insists on seeing the council immediately. The council members exchange another glance. Whoever this stranger is, she has captured all of their attention. Yoda and Mace follow the temple guard outside.
There we go.
Advising the rest of the council to await more details about this mysterious visitor. They find her standing near the temple entrance. Her back is turned toward them as she quietly studies the towering stone pillars. as though remembering a place she has not seen in an age. As Yoda and Mace approach,
There we go.
begin to understand that the temple guard had not exaggerated. The force surrounding this woman is unlike anything either master has ever encountered. Her connection to the force seems strangely detached, almost as though it flows around her rather than through her. It is familiar, yet somehow foreign, leaving even Yoda struggling to understand what he is sensing. Mace clears his throat to get her attention. She turns to face them, her expression calm, nostalgic.
My apologies, my friends. It has been a very long time since I last walked these halls. I found myself distracted by old memories.
Care to introduce yourself, stranger?
My name would mean very little to you. It belongs to another age.
Then share it, and let Master Yoda and me decide for ourselves.
My name is Satil Shan.
Impossible. Long ago, one with the Force you became.
The Force has a habit of returning those it still has use for. My ancestor, Revan, knew that better than most. If you doubt who I am, you are welcome to test me.
Yoda closes his eyes. For several long seconds, he says nothing. Finally, he opens them again.
Different your presence is, but false it is not. Yet one question remains. If truly Master Shan you are, then why have you returned?
I wish I knew. The Force does not always explain its intentions. It simply reveals the path before us, and the path has led me here.
Then perhaps your arrival is well timed. We are facing a dilemma. The wisdom of one who has seen another age may help us find the right answer.
Mace gestures for her to come with him back to the council chamber. For another moment, Satil lingers by the temple entrance, her eyes drifting across the statues of Jedi she had never known, but those who had made a name for themselves because of her actions. Then she nods and follows them through the temple. Once seated in the council chamber, Mace and Yoda explain everything to the other Jedi. Despite it being hard to believe that the legendary Grand Master Satil Shan is standing before them, the council members welcome her into their ongoing discussion. The Trade Federation has blockaded Naboo. Negotiations.
So we
failed.
have
the Republic appears
some jasmine
unwilling to
oil.
intervene.
I have
Qui-Gon
both
then
a
recounts
small
their
vial
unexpected stop on Tatooine. There they discovered a slave boy whose connection to the Force surpasses
and a larger
every Jedi on
vial.
record. He even believes the boy may be the chosen one. The council was immediately skeptical about this remarkable claim. However, Qui-Gon shares another revelation that on their way back from Tatooine, they encountered a Sith Lord. Satil raises an eyebrow. Qui-Gon describes his encounter with a menacing creature with red and black skin and horns protruding from his head, but the council are quick to dismiss this claim as a return of the Sith. Satil, however, is intrigued and encourages Qui-Gon to share more details. He describes the warrior's appearance, his fighting style, and the crimson lightsaber he carried. With every detail, Satil's expression grows more serious. When Qui-Gon finishes, silence hangs over the chamber. Mace breaks the quiet with a demand.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Sith survived for thousands of years because they were patient. Never mistake their silence for extinction.
The last great Sith gathering was nearly 1,000 years ago. They were destroyed by the Army of Light. We have seen no
Now
evidence
I'm going
of them
to,
since.
while we're listening
Then
to
they have learned
this,
the Sith are creatures of destruction.
I'm going
but they are also
to
masters of deception. During my lifetime, they nearly destroyed the Jedi Order through open war. When that failed, they changed tactics. After Darth Malgus destroyed the Jedi Temple, the Empire forced us into peace. But it was peace in name alone. The war never truly ended. It simply became invisible. Espionage, manipulation, political influence, assassinations. By the time we realized what they were doing, they had already won half the battle.
The chamber falls silent once again. Satil leans back in her chair. Now, another matter occupies her thoughts.
What?
The Sith have returned. A child unlike any other has appeared, and the Force has chosen this exact moment to return her to the living. She does not believe in coincidences. The discussion soon shifts back to Anakin. The council reiterates its concern about his age and attachments, the dangers of training someone who has already known fear, loss, and slavery. Satil listens patiently before speaking.
Then allow me to train him.
With respect, Master Shan, you have only just arrived. Surely your decision to take responsibility for the boy is not a decision to make so quickly, considering the complexities.
My own training was hardly conventional. Sometimes the Force asks us to abandon tradition. Perhaps this is one of those moments.
The council remains unconvinced, stating that protocol must be observed and that too many questions remain unanswered. Satil accepts their position for the moment and agrees to spend time observing the Republic, the Jedi, and the current state of the galaxy she once knew. Only then will she decide which role she is meant to play. Enjoying the story? You can listen to these on the go. Search Star Theorist or Three-Eyed Theorist on your favorite podcast service. Links are in the description. Now, back to it. Soon after her arrival, news about the return of Satil Shan moves through the
Okay.
temple with astonishing speed. Among those listening most carefully is one Jedi Master in particular, Count Dooku. For years, doubts about the Jedi Order have festered within him. He still serves the Order, still wears its robes and speaks its ideals, but faith has long since begun to crack. Unknown to the Council, those doubts have already driven him down a darker path. Information has quietly been flowing from him to the Sith for some time. The moment he confirms Satil Shan's arrival, he wastes no time in informing his master. Palpatine is genuinely caught off guard upon hearing about Satil Shan's return. The Sith Grand Plan has been in motion for centuries. Every generation has moved it one careful step closer to victory. Every contingency has been considered, except for this one. No Sith holocron has ever spoken of a Jedi Master returning from another age. For the first time in decades, Palpatine is forced to improvise. He immediately abandons his original plan of sabotaging Chancellor Valorum, and instead, he quietly instructs his allies in the Senate to support the Queen's plea for intervention. Valorum, suddenly alarmed with unexpected political momentum, finally authorizes decisive action against the Trade Federation. A Jedi task force is dispatched to Naboo to end the blockade, and at the same time, Palpatine issues secret orders to Darth Maul to cover up their involvement on Naboo by ensuring no witnesses or loose ends are left behind for the Jedi to discover. Working alongside Queen Amidala and the Naboo resistance, the Jedi reclaim the capital city. The droid army is shut down once the Trade Federation flagship is destroyed in orbit. Victory comes swiftly. As they seek to apprehend Newt Gunray for questioning, they discover that the Viceroy has been mysteriously murdered. While the Republic celebrates its victory, Satil quietly continues her observations. The Jedi and the Republic continue to work together, but their relationship has changed. Rather than just being allies, the Jedi are increasingly tied to the whims of the Senate as an extension of their will. The realization leaves an uneasy feeling in her chest. The Jedi still believe they are independent, but she is no longer convinced they are. At first, she tells herself perhaps this is simply a different era, and that the Order has evolved over the generations. But the longer she remains on Coruscant, the harder it becomes to believe. She remembers the temple she once called home. She remembers Darth Malgus standing among its ruins after its fall. At the time, she believed that was the darkest day in Jedi history. Back then, darkness came with fire, with armies and lightsabers. This darkness she is witnessing now is quieter. It is far more patient, hiding behind friendly faces, politics, and bureaucracy. This darkness seeks to hollow out the Order from within. Satil reaches her conclusion. Anakin cannot be trained here in the Jedi Temple when it is being corrupted by the Senate. The following morning, Satil requests another audience with the Jedi Council to deliver her decision about Anakin.
The boy cannot be trained here.
I thought you wished to train him yourself.
I do, just not in this temple. The Jedi have forgotten that the Force exists beyond these walls. If Anakin is truly the chosen one, then he deserves more than doctrine. He deserves to understand the Force itself.
Are you questioning the teachings of the Order?
I am questioning whether the Order still remembers why those teachings existed in the first place. I have seen what happens when the Jedi begin serving institutions instead of people. And if the Sith have truly returned, then Coruscant is the last place I would choose to remain.
Surely you do not believe the Sith could hide here.
If they were hiding in plain sight, you would not know it. This place stinks of corruption. I can feel the greed of the people in a place like this, the ambition, the selfishness, and yet the Jedi do nothing.
I will admit the Republic is far from perfect. That is why it is critical that the Jedi remain here to serve as the beacon for the people, to remind them what virtue looks like.
Virtue? Is that why you remain here, and not because you wish to lord your authority over others? Make no mistake, Master Windu. Those who breathe in corruption will find themselves tainted. I would know. It was that same hubris that led to the fall of the Jedi Temple long before. I've already watched the Jedi Order fall. I will not watch another. I wish you all well.
As Satil prepares to leave Coruscant, many Jedi at the temple begin speaking in hushed tones about her power and accomplishments, and it leads them to wonder if she is the true path going forward. Qui-Gon and Anakin are the first to join her, which does not surprise her. She is caught off guard when the others arrive: Master Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Shaak Ti, Quinlan Vos, and dozens more. By the following morning, there are hundreds ready to follow Satil Shan as she begins her journey out of the temple and away from Coruscant. It is the largest defection of the Jedi in recent history, and the sight does not go unnoticed. From the highest balcony of the Senate District, 2 Sith watch the procession with quiet interest. Once again, Palpatine finds himself blindsided. This was never supposed to happen. The Jedi were meant to fracture later, not now. Not under someone capable of uniting them. His original plan had always been to slay his own master after the Naboo crisis. Now, killing Plagueis would weaken him. Now he needs every advantage he can get, especially against someone like Satil Shan. Yet, even disaster creates opportunity. Palpatine slowly smiles as he watches Satil leading hundreds of Jedi away from the temple. Perhaps they cannot destroy Satil outright, but they can divide those who follow her, turning them against one another and corrupting them from within. He already has the perfect man for the task. Count Dooku volunteers to accompany Satil's followers. His departure appears appropriate, as he's always been critical of the Council. It seems so natural for him to follow that no one suspects they have a Sith spy in their ranks. Satil leads the growing procession off-world to Tython, just as the Jedi had done long ago. It is the birthplace of the Jedi, the world where the Order first learned to hear the voice of the Force. She remembers the journey to the temple on Tython as though no time has passed. When they finally arrive,
so we're still
Jedi
waiting for
silent.
this to finish.
The Force here feels different.
Melting the last
every
of
stone,
everything.
every tree, every breath of wind. It speaks without interruption. It embraces them and brings them a stillness unlike anything they've experienced before. Satil smiles for the first time since returning to life as she walks up the steps of the old temple, her home. Time has weathered all its walls and allowed vines to creep across its stone, but its presence in the Force remains untouched. She climbs up the stairs and turns to address those who have followed her. Hundreds of masters, knights, and Padawans, all waiting to hear what comes next.
This is where our order began. Long before Coruscant. Long before the Republic. Long before the Jedi became guardians
Actually,
of
these
governments.
vials are
We
the
were
same
students of the
size,
Force.
Mom.
I did not bring you here to abandon
These are
the
just
Jedi.
really
I
thick.
brought you here so that we might remember
Thick
what it
boy.
truly means to be one. The Jedi Code has guided countless generations, but it has also limited them. The Code has led you to mistake fear for wisdom, attachment for corruption, and emotion for weakness. This is a path to imbalance. Here, we will feel, we will love, we will grieve, and we will master our emotions to strengthen our connection to the Force. The light will forever remain our guide, but we will no longer mistake tradition for truth. From this day forward, we will walk a different path, a freer path. Let Tython be the place of our rebirth once again.
The courtyard erupts into applause. The weeks that follow transform Tython as abandoned temples come alive, and a new order calling themselves the Satilans takes shape. The most experienced Jedi Masters like Plo and Qui-Gon and Quinlan and Kit Fisto take the lead in developing new techniques to commune with the purified Force on Tython. Training practices change immediately, with meditation in the morning and sparring and combat drills in the afternoon. The Satilans learn to remain connected to the Force regardless of circumstance, with every movement becoming an extension of the Force. Free of the rigid structure of the Jedi Order, the Satilans begin rediscovering abilities long thought impossible. Some learn to manipulate wind, others discover they can influence heat and cold. A handful find that they can channel raw Force energy into devastating bursts unlike anything taught on Coruscant. Among them all, Anakin advances faster than the rest. The boy possesses an extraordinary instinct. Satil helps him forge his first lightsaber and guides him through battle exercises. Her methods are militant yet compassionate, as she teaches Anakin how to hold his own in a fight, and also how to balance his emotions. When he speaks of missing his mother, Satil listens to him. Instead of rejecting attachments, she teaches him to balance them. To feel the love of someone is to be celebrated.
We're
but
almost
it must not consume his thoughts.
done.
Because of this, she pays for Shmi's release and has her brought to Tython, where she can serve as part of the Satilan support staff. Anakin is allowed to see her, provided he pays attention to his studies and practices. This proves important as their efforts shift beyond Tython. The Satilans disperse across the galaxy in small groups as Jedi free to answer the call of the Force wherever it leads them. Within weeks, word of their existence begins spreading across the Republic, of their willingness to go where the Republic will not. As unrest grows on neglected worlds and piracy flourishes along forgotten hyperspace lanes, the Satilans answer the call. They travel in small groups, each one entrusted to solve problems without waiting for permission from Coruscant. Some negotiate, others defend. All of them serve the people before politics. On Rhodia, Kit Fisto and his team frighten off the pirates by using the Force to dehydrate the surrounding jungle, making it seem as though the Jedi are calling a plague on them. On Ryloth, Shaak Ti meets with secessionist leaders and tries to negotiate peace with their leader. When they bring up issues of corruption, the Jedi Master promises that the people will receive the supplies they need, but also that independent charges are filed against Orn Free Ta through third parties. On Kashyyyk, Quinlan leads a team of enhanced Jedi trackers to catch a group of Trandoshan slavers at their compound and arrests them.
Okay,
One by
now
one,
we're going to bring
crises
it
that
down to
have lingered for months quietly
135.
disappear. Even Chancellor Valorum takes notice. For the first time in years, someone is solving problems
And let
faster
it
than
come
the Senate can
down.
debate them. He reaches out to Satil, hoping to formalize a partnership between the Republic and her new order, but she politely declines, saying that the Satilans will work alongside the Republic whenever their goals align, but they will never answer to it.
You need to stop
In many
taking
ways,
naps.
it appears as though the Satilans are succeeding where the order failed. But underneath the surface, Dooku is reporting everything to his
I
masters.
was trying to keep him
Although
up.
he
You were the one who
genuinely
said let him
respects
have a
Satil,
nap
he also finds that her
yesterday.
methods are lacking. She restricts the Satilans to only follow the light side and keeps her order independent. To Dooku, she is wasting potential. Rather than confront her
I didn't
openly,
let him.
he begins
He fell
working in
asleep.
secret to identify those Satilans who might be questioning Satil's methods. He begins gathering names, invites them into quiet conversations beneath Tyloth's ancient temples, and weakens their conviction so that Palpatine can infiltrate their dreams with fear, resentment, and doubt. At the same time, Dooku searches for weaknesses within Tython itself. While Satil speaks of the planet as the birthplace of the light, Dooku knows that no world touched by the Force is ever completely free of darkness. He waits patiently for her missions to take her beyond Tython before he begins his research, and eventually he finds what he's looking for: the Flesh Raiders. They are mutated Rakatans who have devolved into barbaric tribes that linger in the wilderness. Dooku senses the darkness in these creatures and begins communicating with them. Palpatine secretly delivers holocrons containing forbidden knowledge of Sith alchemy and Force domination, ancient rituals lost for generations. Along with a handful of Satilans who have begun questioning Satil's methods, Dooku applies this dark knowledge to strengthen the bodies and minds of the Flesh Raiders, sharpening their rage into obedience and gathering scattered tribes into an army awaiting orders. Just after midnight, while the Satilans lay sleeping, 13 of them breach the lower halls of the temple through a hidden passage. The first night guard watch they encounter is a young Mirialan girl named Sarah, who is barely 16. She draws her lightsaber as they rush toward her, and her screams are what wake the temple. Within moments, Satilan knights flood the corridors. Plo Koon arrives first, slicing down 2 Flesh Raiders before he discovers the body of young Sarah. Qui-Gon and Anakin arrive seconds later. From behind, they hear a primal roar as a Flesh Raider lunges toward them with a heavy club raised overhead. Anakin thrusts out his hand, sending the creature hurtling through the stone pillar with a powerful force push. Then he sees Sarah lying motionless, and anger hits him instantly. His fists tighten across the corridor. The Flesh Raider begins screaming in agony, its bones cracking and body contorting unnaturally as the Force begins crushing it from every direction. Then he feels a hand on his shoulder as Qui-Gon looks at him and shakes his head. Slowly, he takes a deep breath and releases his grip. The Flesh Raider barely has time to recover as the pair drive their lightsabers into it. Satil arrives, her silver hair hanging loose around her shoulders as she steps into the center of the battle. In one smooth motion, she ignites one blade of her saber staff and takes down a Flesh Raider. Effortlessly, she pivots, and her second blade strikes down another before it can even react. Within seconds, the Flesh Raiders fall, and the temple grows quiet once more. Satil kneels beside one of the dead creatures. Something immediately catches her attention. The markings across the skin shimmer faintly beneath the torchlight. As she studies the corpse, her expression hardens as she realizes the signs of the dark side burned into the creature's flesh.
These creatures never come close to the temple. They fear the light of this place. Something drove them here.
It pains me to say it, Master Sean, but someone opened this passage for them. We may have a traitor among us.
Qui-Gon immediately begins to object, but Dooku presses on. If someone within the Satilan Order aided the attack, they cannot afford to ignore it. Satil says nothing. Her thoughts drift back to Coruscant, to everything she had warned the Council about. Corruption, complacency, the slow decay that begins from within. She never imagined she might one day find it here.
Go to bed.
Yet for the first time since founding the Satilans,
He needs
she
to
begins
go to
to wonder
bed.
whether the dark side has followed her to Tython. Later, Dooku approaches her privately. He barely needs to manipulate the conversation. His distrust of the Jedi Order has always been genuine, and now it aligns perfectly with Satil's own fears. He tells her that corruption survives because good people hesitate,
eat that
and
out
now
here.
someone must act. Reluctantly, Satil agrees.
Eat that out
Within
here.
the week, the investigations begin. She intends to oversee them herself, but several secessionist movements across the Republic erupt almost simultaneously, forcing her and many of her senior masters away from Tython, leaving the responsibility of investigating in Dooku's hands. It is exactly the outcome he wanted. He brings forward Jedi whose questions about Satil's methods have been too loud, whose doubts about Tython's isolation have been voiced in the wrong company, and most importantly, those he was able to turn. He frames each one carefully, never accusing directly, only raising concerns, letting suspicion do the rest. The 2 Jedi Masters are suspended pending investigation. A senior knight is expelled after Dooku produces records of unauthorized communications. Whether those records are genuine or fabricated, no one can say. When Satele returns to Tython, she only hears Dooku's version of events, brief snippets that allow him to control the narrative. Meanwhile, Dooku's acolytes begin using the Force to alter the atmosphere within the temple, sowing fear and uncertainty to keep even loyal Satelans on edge. It is subtle enough not to be noticed, but it does have its effect, and Dooku makes words easier to believe. Only Qui-Gon refuses to remain silent. He confronts Satele directly, insisting that the interrogations be stopped.
You think I take pleasure in this?
I think someone is using your convictions against you. These are not traitors, Satele. They are Jedi who asked inconvenient questions.
And one of them opened a passage that cost a Padawan her life.
We don't know that. Suspicion alone isn't enough to draw such consequential conclusions.
I want to believe you, more than you know. But I have seen what corruption becomes when no one confronts it. If I allow the darkness to take root here, everything we've built will die with it.
Despite everything, Satele never neglects Anakin's training. His progress is astonishing, and his curiosity is only balanced by his disagreements. He openly criticizes the investigations, arguing that innocent people are being punished simply because they disagree. When he sees Jedi being kept isolated or being forced to stay in prison cells, Anakin begins to speak out about the way the investigation is being handled. While Qui-Gon is too kind to speak ill of his master, Anakin is more than happy to say that Dooku is going too far. But every time Satele prepares to resolve things, she gets pulled away by some other matter in the galaxy. Eventually, Qui-Gon approaches Anakin in private.
I know you've been having disagreements during your training sessions with Master Shan. I know you've been watching. Tell me what you truly believe is going on.
She's wrong. She's powerful. She's wiser than anyone I've ever met. But she's wrong.
About what?
She's looking for corruption. And she can't see who's creating it.
You have wisdom beyond your years, Anakin. Master T shared similar concerns with me when I asked her opinion. She has been watching as well. Pack a bag. There's someone we need to speak to.
Qui-Gon, Anakin, and Shaak Ti leave Tython before dawn. Before long, they arrive in Coruscant, the vast city.
Oh man!
Them like an old friend. As Qui-Gon exits the ship, another old friend is there to greet them. Obi-Wan meets them at the landing bay. He has grown into himself, and Qui-Gon feels a sense of pride seeing his former Padawan carrying himself with confidence and ease. The young Jedi Knight welcomes them to the Jedi Temple and escorts them to the council chambers. Mace Windu listens without interrupting. Yoda sits with his eyes half closed, his ears tilted slightly forward. The rest of the council absorbs the account of the Flesh Raider attack, the Inquisition, the removals, and the patterns Qui-Gon has noticed in Dooku's movements. When Qui-Gon finishes, the room is quiet.
These accusations are grave. If they are true, this is no longer simply another Jedi Order. It has become something far more dangerous. I know. That is why I came.
I don't think Master Shan is evil.
Evil, perhaps not, but allow these things she has. Trusted her, we did. Allow this to continue any longer, we cannot.
Then we will see the truth ourselves. We leave for Tython, all of us.
Within hours, the Jedi task force led by Mace Windu and Yoda departs Coruscant. When their
No, I'm not
transport is
losing
sent
you
on to
your
Tython,
security
Satele
deposit.
is already waiting at the landing platform.
I lost
Restrained
myself some
expressions
wax,
says
though.
Everything.
We are here to investigate, not to challenge your authority. To help.
You're here because you cannot tolerate something existing outside your control.
Members of your order have been removed without due process. They were Jedi once. We have a responsibility to ask questions.
Oh, you have concerns? Or do you mean someone convinced you to have them?
Master, I have supported you in your belief in your mission, but this is not what our order should be. We are not your enemy.
Her reply is drowned out by the sounds of feral screams erupting from every direction at once. Flesh raiders pour out from the tree line in numbers never seen before. Satele's saber staff hums to life as she orders her followers to form up around her. Satelan knights rush to answer, but they never reach her. Cries ring out from the temple steps as several are cut down before they can reinforce the line. At the top stands Dooku's followers, Pong Krell, Cypher Diaz, and several other Jedi that Dooku has quietly recruited over the past several months. With lightsabers blazing, they charge from behind. The Satelans are caught between two enemies at once. Plo Koon falls back into a defensive duet behind Obi-Wan without a word. Shaak Ti sweeps a trio of flesh raiders off their feet with a powerful force push. Kit Fisto lowers the temperature around the battlefield, leaving the reptilian creatures sluggish and slow. Yoda and Mace capitalize immediately, carving through the opening with practiced precision. Nearby, Qui-Gon and Anakin exchange a single nod. Together they thrust out their hands, sending a shockwave through the battlefield that tears open a path for the trapped Satelans to regroup. Anakin charges through the gap and feels darkness pressing against him. These creatures draw their strength from it, and it whispers that he could do the same. It promises greater speed, greater power. For a moment, he almost listens. Then he remembers Qui-Gon's lessons. He lets the temptation pass. Then Satil steps down. She does not shout commands. She simply walks into the open ground between both armies and reaches into the Force. It answers her as though it is Tython itself speaking to her. The nearest flesh raiders stop. Several of them lower their weapons, while the others glance around in confusion, as though they have forgotten why they came. Their hesitation is enough to allow the Jedi to surge forward and cut them down before they recover. A volley of spears whistles towards Satil. She raises one hand, and they disintegrate into dust before they can reach her. From behind her, Pong Krell strikes next. He leaps high above her, driving both lightsabers downward.
Hold on.
With effortless grace, Satil
I'm
slips
coming.
beneath the first strike and steps aside the second. Infuriated, Krell slams down to attack her again.
What do you need?
But his saber flashes upward, locking both of Krell's blades in place. She kicks him across the face and sends him reeling. As he stumbles back, she follows with a force push that sends him stumbling. Krell recovers and begins swinging wildly with his fists. Satil sidesteps his blows before driving her elbow into his chest. As Krell doubles over, the second blade of her saber staff ignites directly into his chin. Only then does she look across the field. In the face of the Jedi Masters, the Flesh Raiders should be breaking ranks, yet they continue to press forward. Something is holding back her allies. Closing her eyes for only a heartbeat, Satil looks beyond the battle itself. She senses fear and doubt spreading through both the Satilans and the visiting Jedi like cracks through glass. She senses an anger growing inside them. It is a subtle darkness that is threatening to tear the very fabric of everything that she has been trying to build. Her attention snaps to the center of the battle, where Anakin is fighting alongside Qui-Gon, surrounded by fallen Flesh Raiders. His light still burns brightly, but it is starting to flicker. The anger in him is rising at an alarming rate. Satil cuts her way toward him. She arrives just as he snarls and brings down another raider, his teeth clenched and every strike growing heavier than the last.
Anakin, I need your help. We can't win if everyone gives in to fear.
Fear? They're not afraid. They're angry. I'm angry. And we're surviving because of it.
Anakin, you were right. I should have listened. I know why you're angry. But right now our friends need us to steady them. Right now, I need you.
Satil reaches out to him. Anakin studies her for only a moment. Then he takes a deep breath and grasps her hand. Around them, Qui-Gon moves into position, holding back the advancing Flesh Raiders while the two reach into the Force once more. The moment Satil connects with Anakin, she nearly recoils from the surge of their emotions crashing into her. She feels everything Anakin is carrying, his fear, his compassion, his anger. But instead of letting his emotions consume him, Anakin accepts them. He does not bury his anger or pretend it is not there. He acknowledges it, harnesses it as a shield to fight back against those that oppose him. The firmness of his anger steadies her. Together, they reach out farther. Their presence spreads across the battlefield like strands of web, brushing against every Satilan and every Jedi alike. Satil follows behind Anakin's resolve, sending calm where panic had taken root. She offers guidance instead of commands, clarity instead of control. The fear begins to dissolve, and one by one the Jedi steady themselves. The confusion that clouded their minds lifts and is replaced by certainty and confidence. This is a battle meditation, the same technique Bastila Shan once used to unite the Republic, and it transforms the battle almost instantaneously. Broken lines reform,
now,
and the Jedi begin moving with a single purpose once again.
We're gonna transfer over into doing our Diamond Art.
Yoda and Mace see her moving and immediately follow behind. Even while fighting, Satil continues, searching through the Force for the source of the darkness that has been invading their minds. Amidst the chaos, she finds a single thread that stretches through the battlefield, weaving between the Flesh Raiders and the renegade Jedi alike. She follows it past the temple to a rocky ridge overlooking the valley, where three figures await: Dooku, Palpatine, and Plagueis.
Master Shan, I confess I had hoped you would remain occupied below.
I know what you are. I've fought your kind before.
Not quite like us.
Without another word, he attacks. Twin arcs of crimson lightning erupt from his hands. Satil sweeps her saber staff in front of him. The lightning wraps around the spinning blade before dissipating harmlessly. Attempting to catch Satil off guard, Palpatine rushes forward, his lightsaber whirring. Just as he's about to strike, a flash of purple crashes against a crimson blade as Mace surges, driving his Sith backward. Palpatine answers with a furious barrage fueled by hatred. Mace meets every blow, channeling the anger through Vapad and redirecting Palpatine's own fury against him. Satil leaps
what is he
to
on
join
about?
the duel, pressing Palpatine from two sides at once. As she and Mace prepare to attack together, they sense a blur move with astonishing speed toward them. One moment, Plagueis is several meters away. The next, his saber cane is crashing towards Satil's feet. She avoids the strike, but only barely, the attack throwing her off balance. A force push follows immediately, hurling her backwards. Plagueis advances, only for Yoda to step in between them. The Grandmaster is smaller,
Getting
yet
some
impossibly
batteries.
fast. As Plagueis thrusts, Yoda is already gone, his green blade suddenly flashing behind the Sith, forcing
For
him to
my
spin
fan.
just in time to block. For the first time, Plagueis looks genuinely surprised. He acknowledges Yoda for a brief moment, then nods before their lightsabers collide again. On the far left of the ridge, Dooku meets Qui-Gon. Their blows are not as destructive as the others, as neither seems interested in harming Yoda. Instead, it is a test of words as much as skill.
You were always my greatest student, Qui-Gon. You saw what the Order had become. You simply lacked
96.9.
to change it. It is not too late.
I did change it. I followed Satil to Tython. I helped build something better, and I tried to stop you before you destroyed it.
Everything worth building demands sacrifice.
I know the difference between sacrifice and betrayal.
Dooku's next attack is focused. Restraint disappears from every strike. Qui-Gon gives ground again and again, driving steadily toward the edge of the ridge. Dooku is too powerful for him to overcome. Then, the wind explodes. Anakin crashes into the duel from Dooku's right, calling the air itself to his aid. A violent gust slams into the Count, lifting him off his feet and throwing him across the ridge. Dooku lands hard and immediately retaliates. A wave of dark side energy tears down through the boy with enough force to kill him outright. Qui-Gon reaches Anakin's side just in time.
There we
they
go.
raise their hands. The air changes again, and everything begins to slow. The Force itself seems to drag through invisible resistance. Dooku feels it immediately. Every one of his movements becomes heavier. Every attack takes greater effort. Recognition flashes across his face as he realizes that he is caught in stasis.
She taught you well.
She taught me to finish it.
Anakin raises his lightsaber. Dooku can do nothing as the boy stands over him, ready to end it all with one strike. As Anakin tightens his grip, he looks toward Qui-Gon. He sees the slight shake of the head. It is enough to make him drop his blade as he feels the anger leave him. Instead of killing Dooku, he thrusts out his hand. The Force slams into the Count, knocking him unconscious. Below them, at the center of the ridge, the other duels have become one. Mace drives Palpatine backward while Yoda keeps Plagueis occupied, their lightsabers flashing through waves of crackling Force energy. Blood runs down the side of Mace's face from a wound above his temple. He ignores it. He pushes forward, harnessing Palpatine's fury and turning it back against him. It is a dangerous balance. One mistake in the darkness he channels could consume him instead. Palpatine senses the conflict edging on Mace's mind and targets it.
You have always known the Senate was corrupt. Long before Satil said it, you felt the rot. You want the same thing.
Your
What?
words mean nothing against your actions. Your lies will save you now.
And what do you think happens after you defeat me? The Order survives. The Republic survives. Both continue rotting exactly as they always have.
The veiled truth in Palpatine's words distracts Mace just enough to cause him to strike a fraction too slow. Palpatine seizes the opportunity, unleashing a burst of lightning at Mace, who barely gets his blade up before the blast hurls him backward. Then the Sith Lord reaches into the living world around him. Every tree and plant within reach withers in an instant, its energy drained away and drawn into his hands. Then he unleashes it at Mace.
I love you.
The Jedi Master plants his feet and tries
I'm
to
gonna
withstand
miss
it.
you, little
But
lady.
the power is overwhelming. It tears through his defenses, burning
Hope
across
you
his
know
body
that.
as he falls to his knees, crying out in agony. Satil intervenes.
Really?
She appears between them in a blur of motion, her lightsaber intercepting Palpatine's next strike before he can press the advantage.
Gee, that's weird.
Instead of resisting the energy, she redirects it, dispersing the darkness harmlessly into the ground. As the energy returns to the earth beneath her feet, Satil follows it and reaches deep into Tython,
I'll do my
drawing
best.
upon its ancient and pure force, and directs it towards her companions. Mace rises. The burns across his body begin to fade, and strength floods back into his limbs. Palpatine's confidence disappears. The Sith Lord barely has time to recover before Mace rejoins the fight. Satil and Mace attack together. Palpatine parries one strike, then another. The last strike comes too quickly, and the pair drive their lightsabers through his chest. Nearby, Yoda and Plagueis continue their duel. The force around them distorts the air itself, shimmering like heat rising from stone. Shadows gather around the Mun as he shapes them into a living barrier, forcing Yoda to cut through the layer after layer of darkness. Satil arrives to aid Yoda, raising a single hand and unraveling the shadows. Plagueis reacts instantly, unleashing crimson lightning at her, but she catches it with her other hand. The bolts curl around her open palm before fizzling out into the air. She and Yoda press forward, working together to clear away the darkness while reaching into the force flowing beneath Tython itself. They concentrate its ancient energy as
have
it
this
surges
stretched on?
up
I
through
can't.
the earth, and a massive root erupts from
Your
the
water?
ground with astonishing speed.
I got you, Lou.
Punching through Plagueis' defenses before piercing into his side. The Sith staggers. He is fighting three opponents at once: Satil, Yoda, and the world itself.
I don't
From one
remember.
Jedi Master to the next,
Oh, are you
he
going to have
senses
this stretched
Dooku
over a
Palpatine
frame and hang
defeated.
it up?
Recognizing that the battle is over,
The
he lets his
Diamond Dart
lightsaber
I'm
fall.
making you.
A faint smile crosses his face as he looks at Satele right in the eyes. With a simple wave of her hand, she uses the Force to knock Plagueis unconscious. Silence settles over the ridge. Far below, the sounds of battle begin to fade as the remaining Flesh Raiders are driven off and renegade Satelans are rounded up. The Masters of the Jedi Council request to take the Sith Lords and renegades back to Coruscant so they face appropriate justice for their actions, a decision Satele accepts so long as the rest of her followers are able to remain on Tython, and that her order is recognized as a sister organization to the Jedi. Together, the Jedi and Satelans begin to rebuild all that the Sith had worked so hard to destroy, bringing an end to the grand Sith plan and ushering in a new age of order and peace
You doing that for me?
the galaxy.
You taking
That's
some
our
before you
theory.
leave?
Star Wars is a galaxy filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey to a galaxy far, far away, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to check out our sister channels, Half-Blood Theorist and Three-Eyed Theorist, for deep dives into Harry Potter or Game of Thrones.
Apparently, the S doesn't exist. Just one throne.
What if Darth Vader cloned Luke Skywalker? In Revenge of the Sith, we witness Anakin lose to Obi-Wan on the Mustafar Bank and be sentenced to a life in the Darth Vader suit. From here, he lived in agonizing pain for over 2 decades, forever tormented by the master who manipulated him, Palpatine. For every year Anakin was Vader, he wanted to get rid of Palpatine, to fulfill the rule of 2 and become the true Sith of the galaxy. But he couldn't. He wasn't powerful enough, and Palpatine had created his suit to be susceptible to Force lightning. But what if Vader found another way to challenge Palpatine? What if Vader actually cloned his son, Luke Skywalker? How would that make things different? Now of course, what ifs can go in many different directions, so today, let's follow this one. But I would love to hear your take on this story in the comments below. Our story begins after the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Vader was alone, meditating in his bacta tank on Mustafar, reliving the recent events in his head. Only days earlier, he fought his son on Cloud City, and it was there he tried his best to turn Luke to the dark side so they could work together, but his son said no. Vader was furious. He had this whole plan worked out. His son would join him, then he would train him in secret, until he was more powerful than himself, and then they would go and defeat the Emperor. It was perfect. He knew that only his son had the level of power that could do this. He remembered his old apprentice, Starkiller. He failed him, and now his son has too. But what could he do? There must be another way. As Vader lay in his bacta tank, thoughts and ideas came in and out. He tried conjuring up different ways of turning Luke to the dark side, but that was too risky and also would take too long. No, he needed a better way. Maybe he could kidnap one of his friends, like Princess Leia, and then force Luke to help him. But even that left things unpredictable, and Luke would just grow to resent him and perhaps even turn on him. Vader closed his eyes and concentrated all of his power on the Force. And when he did, the idea finally hit him like a ton of bricks. Cloning. He could clone his son and raise him with one goal and one idea in mind: killing the Emperor. This was perfect. Vader loved the idea. The Dark Lord prepared his shuttle and left Mustafar, setting sights back to Cloud City. It was here where Vader went to the place that he had fought Luke and chopped off his hand. While Vader knew he wouldn't be able to get a blood sample from Luke himself, because that would be too difficult, he had one more plan. So, just like Luke, he jumped from the platform, but instead of falling down to the right, he leapt down the same trajectory as his severed hand did. As he reached the bottom, he fell into an abundant garbage chute and landed in a heap of junk. Calling on the Force, Vader lifted everything into the air except for the one thing he was looking for: Luke's severed hand. He takes it and leaves. Now Vader has enough genetic material and blood from Luke to begin the cloning process. But there was only one problem. Tapoka City, where the clone army was created, was destroyed. He needed a new plan. Vader traveled to Kamino, and instead of going to the destroyed capital city, he traveled to Tamira City, where he had cloned Galen Merrick only a few years prior. Landing his Lambda T4A shuttle, Vader walked into the cloning city, and was shocked to find the old Prime Minister, Lama Su. Vader thought he was dead, that he perished on Mount Tantus when it was destroyed a couple of years ago. but here he was right in front of him. Lama Su remained stoic at the sight of Darth Vader, and when the Dark Lord requested that he needed the clone to be made, Lama Su offered him a deal. He said in exchange for Vader keeping it hidden that he's still alive, he will secretly create a clone for him. Vader agreed. The Prime Minister began stating that he would need to get a blood sample from the person whom he desired to be replicated, and before Lama Su could continue speaking, Vader presented the severed hand from Luke Skywalker. Very well, Lama Su said, this should do just the trick. And from here, Vader would give all the details to the Prime Minister about the type of clone he desired. He ordered there to be extreme accelerated aging to 18 years old, stating he required this clone immediately. Vader knew the standard cloning procedure could take decades, and he didn't have that much time. He needed this clone now. Finally, Lama Su asked how many units he would be requiring, but Vader shocked him by saying only one clone is necessary. Deep down, Lama Su knew this was a bizarre project, but he also knew better than to ask any questions. And so with that, Vader turned and left Tamira City as the Kaminoans got to work. A couple of months would pass, and Vader continued his work as the Emperor's enforcer and second in command of the Empire. He had spent his time fighting rebels on several planets, and the rebellion continued to grow exponentially in size. Ever since the first Death Star was destroyed, support for the rebellion grew, and it was like the citizens of the galaxy realized the Empire wasn't invincible. Eventually, Vader was informed that his clone of Luke Skywalker was ready. Lama Su informed Vader that everything went successfully. Vader takes his new clone and travels back to Mustafar. The most exciting thing about this clone was that it had a positive M count, and when Vader conducted his own midichlorian test, it showed a very similar M count to his own. Now all Vader had to do was wait until the accelerated aging kicked in. 3 months had passed, and the clone of Luke Skywalker was now 18 years old. Vader had already instructed him in the basics of the Force, and his son was extremely powerful. Each and every day, Vader trained Luke brutally, teaching him everything he knew about the Force and the dark side. There were no days of rest, no mercy. From dawn till dusk, Luke was pushed through relentless training sessions, exhausting lightsaber drills, and long studies on why the Jedi had failed and why the Sith were destined to rule. In a strange way, it made Vader proud. Watching Luke grow faster and stronger forced Vader to reflect on his own life. He had long abandoned the name Anakin Skywalker, yet seeing this version of his son stirred thoughts he refused to acknowledge. He began to imagine what things would have been like if Padme had survived, and if they raised their children together. What would his life look like now? But Vader quickly shut these thoughts out. They were weakness, and he needed to remain strong if they were going to face the Emperor. This Luke was nearing the power Vader himself might have reached if Mustafar had never claimed him. But it wasn't only power, it was who Luke was becoming. This clone was darker, unburdened by Jedi restraint or compassion. He was not held back by hope or mercy. He carried anger, he carried ambition, and with each passing day, he became more dangerous. There was only one problem. As Luke's power in the Force continued to grow, Vader had to ensure that the Emperor never learned of his existence. Palpatine could not know, not now, not ever. Vader took every precaution. Though the Emperor maintained guards and observers near his stronghold, Luke was never allowed beyond the deepest chambers of Mustafar's fortress. Luke lived and trained in complete secrecy. For over a year, Vader personally oversaw his training, returning to the fortress daily. On this day, Vader arrived earlier than usual. Luke immediately sensed it. Vader informed him that his connection to the dark side had deepened, and that his power is nearing the point Vader had been waiting for. Luke, as always, showed no hesitation. He believed he had been ready for some time, and made it clear he was tired of waiting. But Vader corrected him. He reminded Luke of his place. Luke in turn reminded Vader of the truth Vader refused to speak out loud. Without him, the Emperor could never be defeated. Vader recognized the arrogance immediately. It was his own, and Vader knew for certain that this clone was his son. The tension escalated. Luke ignited his blade and attacked without warning, forcing Vader to respond. Their sabers collided, red against red, filling the chamber with sparks and heat. This was common between the two, and they dueled together lots, knowing that's exactly what they'd be doing against the Emperor. But this was different. Luke was faster, stronger, more aggressive than before. Vader felt it, and despite himself, he enjoyed it. For a time, Vader allowed the duel to continue, observing Luke's growth, but eventually he'd seen enough. With a sudden surge of power, Vader disarmed Luke and drove him to the ground, ending the fight in an instant. He acknowledged Luke's progression, but made it clear that arrogance would be his undoing. Such recklessness would never be enough to defeat the Emperor. Luke rose, frustrated, pressing Vader on why he was still being held back. He wanted to be at Vader's side, he wanted to hunt Jedi, he wanted purpose beyond these walls. Vader ordered patience. Luke then did something dangerous. He forced Vader to confront what he truly was, a reminder of everything Vader had lost, a living reflection of the man he could have been. Rage surged through Vader. For a moment, he considered ending it, ending him, but he didn't, because Luke was right. Without him, this plan would fail. Vader finally told Luke what he wanted to hear. A few more months, that's all that remained. When the time came, he would be ready. Luke accepted this, and Vader turned and left the chamber, the fire of Mustafar burning beyond the walls. Only 6 weeks would pass, and Vader believed that Luke's clone was ready to face the Emperor. He also saw a strong opportunity. In only 2 days, the Emperor was moving the Death Star above the forest moon of Endor, and he would personally be on it. This was the chance. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. So, they left Mustafar and set course for Endor. A few hours later, they exited hyperspace to the site of the Death Star. They landed the shuttle using Vader's Imperial codes, and once on board, they made their way to the Emperor's throne room. As the elevator doors opened, they saw Palpatine seated on his throne with his back towards them. Slowly, he turned to face them, already knowing why they had come. There was no surprise on his face, only satisfaction. He studied the clone carefully, feeling the power radiating from him, and expressed his approval. This was beyond anything he had ever anticipated. Vader, against all odds, had succeeded. Palpatine acknowledged the betrayal without anger. He spoke as though this had always been inevitable. There was actually a part of Palpatine that was impressed, and had always wanted Vader to take some initiative and do something to shock him. Nevertheless, he reminded Vader of what he was, what he had always been, a servant, a tool believed it could one day rise above its purpose. As they stood there,
Hey everybody, this video was going to go up a couple days ago, but I had to delay because I just got engaged to my wonderful girlfriend. Anyways, just a personal update I wanted to share with you all, and let's get into the video. Our story begins in the world of Sojourn, a forest world that was strong in the dark side, and today, Grandmaster Yoda was emerging into the atmosphere all by himself. Just a few short months ago, a new Chancellor was elected for the Republic, and the first Sith in 1,000 years emerged to fight Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And much to Yoda's dismay, Qui-Gon fell in battle. Deep down, Yoda carried a great deal of the blame from that fateful duel, and that was part of the reason he agreed to let the young Obi-Wan Kenobi train the boy, Skywalker, from Tatooine. But as the days went by, the revelation of the Sith began to truly eat at Yoda. He wished Qui-Gon were still here, and even through his 900 years of life, he still did sometimes miss those who pass on to the Force. So, without Qui-Gon, Yoda felt he at least owed his former friend the duty of ensuring that the Sith have not fully returned. Yoda spent any free time he had over these last few months traveling to known dark side Sith worlds in the Old Republic times, Malachor, Moraband, Dathomir, Umbara, and many other lesser-known former base worlds, just to make sure they were still abandoned. And today, Yoda was on Sojourn, a lesser-known smaller world that the Sith and the Banks used in the ancient times for transactions and meetings. Yoda truly didn't expect to find much here, but the world was on the return route to Coruscant, so he didn't see any harm in looking around. And as Yoda flew his small ship into the atmosphere, he closed his eyes, letting the Force guide him, and quickly he noticed a small Force signature somewhere on this world. Nothing dramatic, but enough to draw his attention, and so Yoda spent about an hour trying to locate this vergence. And finally, he would come upon a part of the world that was much more desolate than the rest of it. Yoda ran a few scans, and quickly he discovered that this area was hit with some sort of nuclear blast not long ago, clearly meant to kill someone or destroy something, or both. Eventually, Yoda would notice the smallest bits of old ruins destroyed from the blast, and he turned his ship down into the center of it. Yoda's species was unaffected by the radiation here, and the Grandmaster got out of the ship, quickly realizing that all of these ruins and everything in them were completely wiped out. There was nothing left, and yet Yoda still felt a pull. Yoda sunk deep into meditation, seeking out the source of this pull in the Force, and after a long search, Yoda felt a faint hum underground. He plunged his lightsaber into the rotting soil, and he freed up enough space to reach down and find the source of this disturbance. A Sith holocron. Yoda held the jagged holocron in his hands, and it was cold yet pulsing faintly, as if it were alive and aware of him. For a long moment, he did not move, because he understood what this required. Sith holocrons did not open to patience or peace, but to conflict, tension, or something far more dangerous. Yoda knew he should bring it to the archives in the temple, but he also knew he could open it. So, Yoda closed his eyes, and he reached inward to the buried places that he so rarely allowed himself to touch. He let himself feel the weight of Qui-Gon's death, and he felt his anger that he had not foreseen the Sith, felt frustration that after centuries of vigilance, they'd returned under his watch. The air around him seemed to tighten as the holocron reacted, almost testing him, demanding more. Through discipline forged over 9 centuries, he balanced himself between dark and light, allowing just enough of that inner fire to surface before slowing it with his trained control. And then, the holocron unfolded in his hands, as if the darkness itself had been forced to acknowledge that a Jedi Master was here and it could not be broken. The face of a masked Mune appeared in the holocron, introducing himself as Darth Plagueis. And Plagueis said he is recording into this holocron in case he dies here today, as he has just been informed that someone is going to attack this base on Sojourn, and the process of destroying all of his experiments is underway. Plagueis spoke as if he could not bear the idea of not leaving behind any sort of legacy, and so he told his apprentice that he had done it. He has achieved the power to stop others from dying, though he has yet been unable to truly master the ability to keep himself alive. Plagueis said that if he does die, that knowledge dies with him. But he's done it, and he told his apprentice that he can do it as well. In this recording, Plagueis never said Palpatine or Sidious's name. He only referred to his apprentice as his apprentice. He did not disclose much else, and when the message ended, Plagueis told his apprentice that if he dies today, he will never learn the power, but that only he can teach him. And then Yoda was able to infer what has happened to the Sith. It appeared to him as if this Darth Plagueis was the Sith Master, and he died in the nuclear blast on this world. Plagueis' apprentice never found this holocron, as he was cut down on Naboo by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so, as Yoda sat here on Sojourn, he allowed his shoulders to relax a bit. The Sith, he thought, were dead. Of course, Yoda did not know about Sidious. Plagueis died here, he thought, and his apprentice died on Naboo. The galaxy was safe. And now we move forward around a decade, as Anakin Skywalker and Grandmaster Yoda are sitting face to face in Yoda's personal quarters. By now, Yoda was well aware that he was truly terribly wrong about the Sith on Sojourn. Plagueis was a great mystery to him. Maul had returned, but was no longer affiliated with the Sith, and instead Yoda's former Padawan Dooku appeared to have been the Sith apprentice during this past decade. But in the center of it all was the name that gave Yoda and the rest of the Council a great uncertainty: Darth Sidious. Who was he? How was he tied to Plagueis? Has he learned the same power, if not even more power, that Plagueis learned about saving life? All of these questions enter Yoda's mind at least once per day, along with questions about Anakin Skywalker himself, the Chosen One. Some Jedi believe that Yoda did not concern himself with these questions, or at least they believed he hadn't done enough to slow down the tide of the dark side. What many Jedi failed to understand was that the growth of the dark side was relentless, and at this point, it could only be reversed by the one born to restore balance. For over 800 years, Yoda believed that many Jedi possessed that ability. The Sith were all but extinct, and eventually Yoda even saw himself as the one that was holding back the dark tide. But now, after these years, Yoda knew he was not the one who would restore that balance. He was certainly aged, experienced, diplomatic, brilliant with a lightsaber, and familiar with the dark side. But for years, he believed it was stopped on Naboo, until Geonosis. Now Yoda understood that for 1,000 years, the Sith had not simply been waiting for a moment to emerge, but rather waiting for the birth of one strong enough to embrace the dark side fully and become its dedicated host. This, Yoda believed, was the mysterious Sidious, the one who loomed over the galaxy like a shadow, and yet has never been seen by any Jedi. But Yoda believed he was as arrogant as the Jedi has become in those 1,000 years. He believed the battle of light versus dark was yet to be won. And at the center of it all was the boy in front of him, Skywalker. And what better way to ensure total victory than by killing or corrupting the Chosen One? And today, Anakin revealed that he's been having visions, and they are of pain, suffering, and death. Yoda remarked that this was no surprise in these dark times, and he asked if they were of himself or someone close to him. Anakin admitted they were of someone close, and Yoda told him that fear of loss is a path to the dark side. But Anakin shook his head, saying he won't let these visions come true. He won't. Yoda lifted his head, preparing to give Anakin a talk about rejoicing those who transform into the Force, but suddenly years of memories, mysteries, questions, and fears moved back into Yoda's mind. He remembered Darth Plagueis, the Sith who died long before the war, and what Plagueis said in his holocron on Sojourn. He said that he has mastered the ability to stop others from dying by influencing their midichlorians. And Yoda's mind flew outwards towards Sidious and his own questions about Anakin. If the Sith were going to ensnare Anakin in their trap, then it would be wise to offer him something that the Jedi cannot: the power to stop those from dying. At first, Anakin must carry the fear of someone close to him dying, so Yoda simply asked Anakin if he had ever heard of the Sith Lord Darth Plagueis. Anakin shook his head, saying the name is unfamiliar from the ancient texts. Yoda asked Anakin if he'd ever actually read them, and Anakin shuffled uncomfortably before Yoda chuckled and said they're not exactly page-turners, but he is correct. Plagueis does not appear in the texts, and Yoda would ask Anakin to come with him to the restricted archives. And once there, Yoda would show him a Sith holocron that he found long ago, telling Anakin that no other Jedi has seen this, only he has opened it. And together, today, the two of them opened the holocron. Anakin was introduced to Plagueis himself. The Sith Lord described the power that he achieved, the power to save others from dying, but he said that he is the only living being to master such power. Plagueis' hologram insisted to his unnamed apprentice that the power takes years, if not decades, to master, and if he dies, the power dies with him. And Yoda told Anakin that Plagueis died long ago. Anakin asked if Sidious was his apprentice, and Yoda would admit that he was not sure. The lineage before Darth Maul is impossible to know, but Yoda told Anakin now that he must be wary of where these dark visions come from. Anyone who tells Anakin that they have the power to save people from dying is not telling the truth. And these visions may very well come from the Sith themselves, trying to ensnare the Jedi in the dark side. So today, Yoda would give Anakin advice that he could truly use. Treat these visions as the reality that the Sith want, not the reality that will come to pass if the Sith die. Anakin nodded to the Grand Master, thanking him for all of this, and he would depart from Yoda with real hope about the future and the end of the war. And events would of course play out from here, with Anakin visiting the Chancellor, being promoted to the personal representative to Palpatine himself, and a member of the Jedi Council. Palpatine expected Anakin to be denied this seat by the Council, or be denied the role of Master. Either one worked, but instead, Yoda would allow Anakin to have his seat, and he would also make the executive decision to give Anakin the role of Jedi Master. After all, Yoda already brought Anakin into the restricted archives, showing him something that no other Jedi had seen. Yoda was taking a gamble, putting the fate of the Order into Anakin's hands, essentially pitting the Sith's own grand plan against them. And Yoda decided in this meeting that he will not be going to Kashyyyk. Instead, Mace Windu will go and aid the Wookiees in their defense versus the droid armies. Yoda insisted on staying in the temple so he could guide Anakin. And when this council meeting ended, Yoda chose to walk with Anakin instead of Obi-Wan, and he would ask Anakin to just keep a close eye on Palpatine. The council fears that Sidious may have infiltrated the highest levels of the Republic government. Anakin, through all of this, was rather pleased with the way things were going. Sure, he was concerned about his visions of Padme dying, but he was equally concerned that the Sith were the ones planting these visions into his mind. And then, Palpatine would make his first truly fateful mistake at the Coruscant Opera House. Palpatine and Anakin were going back and forth on the Jedi, the influence of power in the Order, and within politics. And Anakin continued to push back, saying that the Jedi used their power for good. So, Palpatine pursued a different path, knowing Anakin was having visions of Padme dying. He would simply ask Anakin if he's ever heard of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. And Anakin froze, because of course, he had heard of this. In fact, he just heard of him. Anakin's mind went back to what Yoda said after the council meeting. Sidious may be influencing Palpatine from the highest levels of government. But Anakin almost felt sick, as he was forced to ask himself, in his mind, if Palpatine could actually be Darth Sidious. He turned to the man that he's trusted for so many years, calmly shaking his head, saying he has not heard of him. Anakin was excellent at hiding his true emotions. Palpatine could usually see through them, but not fully today. And Palpatine would tell Anakin that Plagueis, according to legend, could directly influence the midichlorians in someone to create life. Anakin calmly asked what happened to him, and Palpatine shrugged, saying that Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew, before his apprentice killed him in his sleep. Palpatine smiled gently, a familiar expression, and Anakin just sat for a bit more of the opera, before excusing himself for the night. Palpatine nodded to his friend, but as Anakin left, Palpatine watched him go with a scowl. Something was wrong. He could feel it. And so Palpatine rose to his feet. Meanwhile, in his speeder, Anakin's fingers were trembling as he punched in the code for Yoda's personal quarters. The Grandmaster quickly answered, and Anakin said that their worst fears may have been realized. Palpatine knows of the Sith. He knows the tale of Plagueis, except it is different from the one that Plagueis himself revealed in his holocron. Palpatine said that Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knows. Yoda and Anakin locked eyes, as they came to the same conclusion. Palpatine is Sidious. And Yoda told Anakin to stay put, but a moment later, Yoda saw the hologram of Anakin begin reaching for his throat, and Yoda felt a dark presence washing over Coruscant. Anakin began gasping for air as the hologram was cut off, and alone in his quarters, Yoda did not hesitate. He pulled his lightsaber into his hand, and he sprinted for the temple hangar. Across the city, Anakin was alone in a speeder lot, where he was talking to Yoda when his throat began to close. His ship was hit with a blast of lightning. The comms were shut down, as the glass cover of the speeder was shattered. Glass shards sprayed into Anakin's face and skin as he was lifted out of the speeder, to find Palpatine reaching out his hand in a forced choke. Palpatine told Anakin that he almost fooled him, but his emotions have and will always betray him. Palpatine tightened his grip, and as Anakin was losing his vision, he managed to reach out, grabbing a large shard of the glass with the Force, and whipping it at Sidious. The piece of glass sliced right across Sidious's eye, and the Sith Lord dropped Anakin to the ground, screaming out in pain and shock. Anakin ignited his blue saber, and in the distance, senators and other wealthy beings began to leave the opera house as it was wrapping up. Many of them gasped as they saw the Jedi blade ignite, and Sidious ripped the glass from his face, blasting lightning at Anakin, throwing him off of this suspended lot toward an open hangar bay below. And as Anakin fell, Grandmaster Yoda sped his ship through the traffic, seeing the lightning burst, and he increased his speed. Down in the Coruscant hangar bay, Anakin landed hard on the ground, the air knocked out of him, and Sidious slowly floated down, igniting his crimson saber to match the blood trickling out of his eye. And he told Anakin it is unfortunate their relationship must end this way. But he will not risk everything for the life of a foolish boy. The Chosen One dies today. And Sidious swung his blade down to cut Anakin in half, but a loud scream was heard in front of him, and Yoda flew in, saber ignited, blocking the swing from Sidious and pushing him hard into the steel wall with the Force. Sidious crashed to the floor. He looked up with anger as Yoda helped Anakin to his feet, and both Jedi would ignite their sabers. Sidious quickly blasted lightning, and Yoda moved in, absorbing it with his small blade, while Anakin moved forward low, coming up with a sharp upward slash aimed at Sidious's ribs. Sidious twisted to catch Anakin's strike, and the two locked for a brief moment. Sidious laughed and drove his knee into Anakin's chest, Yoda, who was now flying through the air. Sidious caught his strike one-handed, his other hand immediately reaching out to unleash a burst of lightning that Yoda deflected into the floor. Yoda then dropped down, striking every possible way he could, and Anakin was driving forward with a series of heavy strikes. The Sith Lord snarled in anger at the constant pressure, unleashing a violent force push to send both Jedi crashing to opposite ends of the hangar. Then he began tearing steel plates from the walls and hurling them at the Jedi. Anakin caught one mid-air and threw it back, and Yoda was already moving again as the Sith Lord was being overwhelmed. Desperation soon crept in, and Sidious leaned into it. He extinguished his blade for a split moment and released a full, uncontrolled storm of lightning in all directions, slamming into the walls, the floor, and both Jedi. Anakin had to drop to a knee under the pressure, his saber barely holding lightning back, while Yoda absorbed what he could, before redirecting it outward, the energy ripping chunks from the hangar ceiling. The chaos made an opening, and Anakin saw it. He pushed forward with a strong downward strike, and Sidious reignited his saber just in time to block. But his stance was broken, and Yoda yanked Sidious's footing out from under him, pulling the steel floor upward to destabilize him. And in that fraction of imbalance, Anakin shifted his grip, driving his blade straight through Sidious's chest. Sidious froze, yellow eyes widening in disbelief, and Yoda raised a hand, firing the remnants of Sidious's own lightning back upon him, engulfing his body as Anakin pulled the blade free. The energy consumed him completely, and Sidious melted away into nothing but a loose robe. And without Sidious, Dooku, and Grievous, the war could end with the shutdown of the battle droids and systems, slowly realizing they were all played by their own leaders. Through it all, Grandmaster Yoda would remain at the center with Anakin Skywalker, a Jedi Master who destroyed the trap meant to consume him. The Republic would undergo significant reforms, but while it was all beginning, Anakin revealed the truth about him and Padme. Yoda was admittedly disappointed, and for many years, Anakin would have to prove himself to the Jedi. He'd be watched very closely, but he would keep his seat on the Council as a Jedi Master, preparing for his children to eventually join the Order. The fear of loss still lingered, but Yoda taught him how to confront them in the best way. They would spend long hours in meditation, speaking to each other, and Yoda began preparing Anakin to eventually lead the ever-evolving Jedi Order. Yoda saw in him the future that he would never live to see, and in quiet moments, Yoda would watch Anakin from a distance, and he would remember the names that nearly destroyed him and the...
What if Qui-Gon killed Obi-Wan to defeat Maul? What would have happened then? Let's find.
Darth, theorist, right. Darth, theorist. Darth, theorist, rise.
I wanted news.
What if Pong Krell executed Rex on
But this
Umbara?
title caught
Let's
my
explore the
eye.
depths of it in the video. If you enjoy deep dives into Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, check out our sister channels, Half-Blood Theorist and Three-Eyed Theorist. Links are in the description. The atmosphere on Umbara hangs thick with the scent of ozone and scorched earth. Rex breathes heavily as a circle of blasters surrounds him. His armor bears the batters and scars from the betrayal of his own commander. Pong Krell looms over him with a sadistic smile, his yellow eyes burning with malice.
It's a pity, Captain. You were a capable tool, but tools that develop a conscience are merely scrap metal.
My brothers were not tools. They were soldiers. They were men. You are nothing but a traitor to everything we stand for.
I stand for the future. You stand for a dying order.
Krell gestures to the surrounding clones. They stand stiff, their visors dark, their weapons leveled at their captain.
Execute him.
A volley of blue bolts lights the dim air. Rex slumps to the ground. His mission is over, and his life is extinguished in the mud of a world that never learned of his sacrifice. Miles away, aboard a cruiser in orbit, Obi-Wan Kenobi stands at the viewport. He suddenly gasps, clutching his chest as a sharp, agonizing tear ripples through the Force. It hits him with a wave of pure darkness and sudden, violent finality.
Rex.
His eyes close. He reaches into the Force. He sees the cold betrayal, the Order, and the lights going out in the eyes of one of the finest men he knows. A cold, unfamiliar rage simmers in his gut.
He killed him. Krell did this.
Obi-Wan turns, his face a mask of iron. He skips the call for reinforcements and ignores the Council's approval, marching toward the hangar with a purpose that feels less like a Jedi and more like a storm. When he arrives on Umbara, he finds Krell surveying the battlefield with arrogant satisfaction. Krell senses the arrival and turns, crossing his four arms over his chest.
You are far from your command.
You murdered him. You murdered them all.
I did what was necessary to secure victory. You are too weak to see the truth of this war.
The blue blade ignites with a sharp, violent hum. Obi-Wan abandons his usual defense stance and steps forward with a cold, terrifying intensity. The Basilisk General laughs, drawing his two double-bladed lightsabers. The green and blue plasma casts eerie shadows across his face.
Look at you, the great negotiator, driven to madness by the death of a mere clone.
Obi-Wan remains silent. He lunges while driving heavy and relentlessly aggressive strikes at his opponent. The finesse of Sorosu disappears, replaced by a brutal, crushing offense that forces Krell backward. Krell parries the blow, his massive strength faltering against the sheer ferocity of Obi-Wan's assaults.
Yes, give in to it, Kenobi. Feel the hatred. It's liberating, isn't it? You want to open my throat for what I did to your precious captain.
Obi-Wan ducks under a spinning green blade, his face completely devoid of its usual Jedi calm. He channels the dark energy swelling with the Umbaran air, accelerating his movements into a blur of motion.
Do you feel the hypocrisy choking you? You preach peace while you bathe in the dark side. Strike me down. Prove that the Jedi are nothing but cowards hiding behind a code.
Krell unleashes a heavy forearmed downward strike to crush Obi-Wan's guard. Instead, Obi-Wan sidesteps the attack with
A German drone just hit 434 miles per hour on batteries. So here's two numbers from this week that belong in the same sentence. On June 26th, a German drone company recorded an electric drone hitting 699 kilometers per hour in straight and level flight. That's carry the one 434 miles per hour. It's an unofficial world record pending Guinness certification. Here's why this is such a big milestone. On July 7th, Bloomberg confirmed Ukraine failed to intercept a single one of the 23 Iskander ballistic missiles Russia fired overnight. Not one. The entire point of what Quantum Systems and their Ukrainian engineering partner, WIY Drones, are building is to start connecting
How
those
you
two numbers.
doing?
The drone speed record and the fact that Iskanders are hitting Ukraine without consequence. Because Ukraine doesn't just have a missile shortage, it has a math problem. And I f***ing hate math. The missiles that stop Russia's most expensive threats cost millions of dollars each. Plus, there aren't enough of them. They won't be built fast enough, and the question the defense establishment doesn't want to answer publicly is whether a very fast, very cheap drone could take enough pressure off the upper end of that stack to actually matter. Well, the drone speed record is step one of that answer. Hey friends, Wes here.
I miss you
defense
already.
journalist, Army and Air Force veteran, and I hope you feel the need for speed because today we're covering a speed record, a missile shortage, a drone speed calculation that has some genuinely interesting implications for Russia's Air Force, and the honest answer to the question the headline is implying. Here's the assumption most defense coverage is operating on right now. Interceptor drones are the cheap, slow, Shahed-chasing tool you use to take pressure off the expensive air defense stack. You save your Patriot missiles for ballistic threats, your NASAMs for cruise missiles, and you let your interceptor drones handle the Shaheds before they eat through your high-end magazine depth. Well, that hierarchy makes sense.
I'm
It
not
also
that
assumes
missable.
the
Not like you.
interceptor tier stays slow. Well, Quantum Systems in Germany just demonstrated that electric drone propulsion doesn't have to stay slow. And once it doesn't, the question of which threat tier a drone interceptor can realistically address, well, that starts shifting a little bit. Not all the way to fighter jets, not yet, but further up the threat ladder than most people are modeling. That shift is worth paying close attention to. On June 26th, the Munich-based company's N3XT team, or Next team, took their Apex Record Hunter drone to 699 kilometers per hour in straight and level flight. The current official world record for a battery-powered aircraft sits at 657.59 kilometers per hour. The Apex cleared it by 41 kilometers per hour. Now, official certification is pending with a formal attempt coming in the next few weeks. But the Apex Record Hunter was developed over about a year. It's a technology demonstrator, not a production weapon. Quantum has been explicit about that. What it does, though, is it proves that a specific propulsion architecture can hit speeds nobody's hit on electric power before. And several of the engineering innovations from the program are headed directly into next-generation interceptor work. That interceptor work is happening through WIY Drones, Quantum's Ukrainian subsidiary. WIY is pursuing 2 Ukrainian national speed records in the next few weeks. The Strela interceptor, targeting the fastest FPV drone carrying a half-kilogram payload, and the SPYS, targeting the fastest anti-aircraft class FPV interceptor. These aren't airshow records. They're capability benchmarks directly tied to what Ukraine encounters on the battlefield every night. Quantum also has a separate interceptor program already further along. The Jaeger uses a combined electric and rocket drive, hits 4,000 meters in altitude in 30 seconds, engages targets at up to 25 kilometers, and operates on a hit-to-kill basis with no explosives. The company already supplies Ukraine with its Vector reconnaissance drone. So this isn't a company learning what Ukraine needs. It's a company that's been in Ukraine long enough to know the answer. Oh, and one more thing worth naming, that 434 mile per hour number keeps getting compared to an unofficial New Zealand claim of 453 miles per hour by the Blackbird drone. That number was reportedly achieved downwind in a single direction. The Apex ran in straight and level flight. A certified two-way average and a one-directional downwind pass are genuinely different benchmarks, and until the Blackbird runs the official course, the comparison needs that asterisk. So to understand why drone interceptor speed matters beyond the record book, you have to understand how bad the missile math has gotten. Global production of Patriot PAC-3 interceptors ran about 620 missiles in 2025. That's for the entire world. Ukraine, the US, Germany, Japan, Poland, the Gulf states, and everyone else waiting in that queue, sharing 620 missiles annually. During the Iran conflict earlier this year, Middle Eastern countries burned through more than 800 Patriots in a matter of days against a combined attack of 2,000 drones and 500 ballistic missiles from Iran. Ukraine's minimum viable monthly requirement, according to Defense Express modeling, is more than 60 PAC-3s just to pace Russia's ballistic missile campaign. U.S. production, headed toward 2,000 per year by 2033, is Lockheed's target, but Lockheed's own leadership told the Financial Times they can't guarantee delivery, timelines, or allocation priorities for existing customers. Yikes. The queue is long, and the factory isn't magic. Also, a PAC-3 interceptor costs somewhere between $3 and $6 million.
Where?
Production FPV interceptor drone costs $1,000 to $5,000. That cost differential is not a rounding error, it is several orders of magnitude. Okay, so the Shahed 136 flies at about 185 kilometers per hour. A current generation FPV interceptor doing 300 kilometers per hour is more than fast enough to run it down. But Russia has been accelerating its drone program. The Duran 4, Russia's newer jet-propelled kamikaze drone, reaches speeds up to 500 kilometers per hour. That's the threat that pushed the requirement for faster interceptors, because 300 kilometers per hour on an FPV can't reliably catch a 500 kilometer per hour target from behind. It needs either a head-on engagement geometry, which requires positioning and prediction, or it needs more speed. Deagle, the Apex at 699 kilometers per hour, handles the Duran 4 in any geometry. That's not a marginal improvement. That's moving from sometimes possible to reliably achievable. Now, cruise missiles are the next tier. Russia's KH-101 and KH-55 cruise missiles travel at roughly 700 to 900 kilometers per hour. A drone interceptor at 699 can engage a cruise missile head-on, which produces a closing speed north of 1,400 kilometers per hour and a collision that doesn't require the interceptor to be faster than its target. It requires the interceptor to be in the right place when the target arrives. That's a positioning problem more than a speed problem, and it's one that radar queuing, loitering behavior, and predictive routing already addresses in current systems. So let's do the honest calculation on the fighter jets. The Su-57 Felon has a top speed of about Mach 2, about 2,450 kilometers per hour at altitude. Down at sea level, its maximum speed is roughly Mach 1.1.
You stupid cornhole!
Its super cruise speed,
I love you.
Supersonic without afterburner, sits around Mach 1.3, or roughly
That's funny.
1,400 kilometers per hour. So the Apex hits 699, as we've said in this video. That's Mach 0.57. A tail chase against an Su-57 at any combat speed is not currently possible with electric propulsion. The jet is between 2 and 4 times faster depending on altitude and throttle setting, so the Apex can't chase an Su-57 yet, but where the math gets more interesting is ambush geometry. If you're not chasing the jet, but positioning ahead of it, the relevant calculation changes from relative speed to closing speed on approach. In the head-on geometry against an Su-57 flying supercruise at 1,400 kilometers per hour, the closing speed between the drone and the jet is 699 plus 1,400, roughly 2,100 kilometers per hour. The engagement window is measured in fractions of a second at typical manpad range distances, so whether a drone interceptor can execute that geometry reliably against a maneuvering 5th-generation fighter is a question the technology can't currently answer. And to build a drone interceptor with a practical engagement envelope against a fighter jet in the current sense of that phrase, you'd need something in the Mach 1.5 range, roughly 1,850 kilometers per hour. So Quantum's not there yet, give them a little bit of time, but to generate enough geometric flexibility to account for jet maneuvering, engagement timing, margins, and the basic unpredictability of a fighter pilot who knows something is coming, that's 2.6 times the Apex's current speed. Now, the Quantum Next team has already said the 699 kilometer per hour number won't stand for long. Robert Gardeman called it an incredible milestone, but only the beginning, and said the team would be back soon to go faster. So the direction of the speed curve is real. Where it arrives and how quickly is the open question. The near-term honest answer on fighters is not yet, but the near-term honest answer on everything below Mach 1, the geometry is already there. So here's what the record doesn't tell us, because a drone hitting 699 in a controlled test environment and a drone interceptor functioning in contested Ukrainian airspace are two different engineering problems. The Apex Record Hunter's specific propulsion architecture and technical specs haven't been published. Quantum got to 699 somehow, and that innovation from that program are headed into the WIY interceptor work, but the path from speed demonstrator to fielded weapon still requires guidance integration, payload testing, countermeasure resistance, and the kind of operational debugging that only happens when things start failing in real conditions. Now, the Strela and the SPYS record attempts from WIY will tell us more than the Apex did, because those platforms carry payloads and operate under mission representative constraints. Those results matter more than the clean airspeed run. And the positioning problem is real. Getting an interceptor drone into the right corridor ahead of a target requires radar queuing, communications infrastructure, a human-machine workflow that is still being figured out under fire in Ukraine. So speed without queuing is just a fast drone flying in the wrong direction. But here's the thing about the direction of travel. Ukraine has taken fiber optic guidance, mesh networking, and a half dozen other technologies from demonstrator to operational deployment in timelines that Western procurement officials would consider logistically impossible. If WIY's interceptors prove the speed at the weapon tier, the workflow problem gets solved in the same way Ukraine always solves workflow problems: quickly, messily, and ahead of schedule. So here's the shift this speed record represents. When you zoom out, for 50 years, air defense has operated on a basic cost assumption. You use expensive guided missiles to intercept expensive manned threats, because the cost of missing a fighter jet or a ballistic missile exceeds the cost of the interceptor. You accept that this calculus is unfavorable for the cheap threats like drones, because the alternative, spending Patriot missiles on Shaheds, is fiscally incoherent and operationally unsustainable. Ukraine's war broke that assumption at the bottom of the threat hierarchy. Russia sends 200 to 300 drones per day. You can't.
I may need to go get eye drops.
You need something cheap at the bottom of the stack so the expensive stuff can breathe. What Quantum and WIY are building is the first
I'm so glad
drone
doing
that's
this that you realized I didn't have my glasses on my
but a
face.
significant portion of the middle. Shaheds, Duran 4s, potentially cruise missiles on favorable geometry. That's not just a Shahed chasing tool. It's a stack reliever that moves the line of what Patriot has to handle. Ukraine needs 60 plus PAC-3 missiles per month, and the global system produces 52. A drone interceptor that takes the Shaheds and the faster drones and possibly lower speed cruise missiles off the Patriot queue doesn't solve the math, but it does change what the math is about. That's not a technology story. That's a doctrine story. Russia's air campaign was built on an economic calculation. Cheap attack drones overwhelm expensive interceptors, ballistic missiles exhaust precious PAC-3 stocks, volume beats the magazine depth of any defender willing to spend $6 million stopping a $50,000 drone. It's a sound calculation. It's been working, but the German engineers who've spent a year losing sleep over an electric drone just posted a number that starts moving one of the inputs. Not enough to break Russia's math today, but enough to make it worth watching very carefully over the next 18 months, as WIY takes what Quantum learned in a test field in Germany and runs it over Ukrainian airspace against real threats and real stakes. $6.99 on batteries with Ukrainian engineers in the room. That might be a record for the record books, but it's also the beginning of a new layer in the stack. That's it for today, my friends. If this was useful, hit subscribe. I cover this kind of development 4 times a week right here on YouTube. For deeper analysis,
Russia is planning an attack. Not on Ukraine this time, though they've certainly plenty more of those in the works. Instead, Moscow is planning attacks on Poland as a way to test NATO's unity, as well as to discourage further funding of Ukraine. That's the warning coming from Washington to Warsaw anyway, and while that might initially sound outlandish given just how much of a regional power Poland is, once you zoom out and see the broader campaign that Moscow has been waging against Eastern and Central Europe, it starts to look a lot less like a wild hypothetical and more like something that actually could get underway. What's at stake in all of this is not whether Poland could handle itself in any all-out war, rather it's how NATO might respond to Russian aggression that could set the stage for something else entirely, an attack against countries far less able to fight back. The report came earlier this month from a joint publication in The Telegraph and their Polish counterpart Onet, citing 5 sources from Polish President Karol Nawrocki's Inner Circle and the Polish Ministry of Defense. Their claim that the US has been warning Warsaw for some time that Russia is weighing an armed provocation on Polish territory. And this isn't some distant, far-off threat that's supposedly coming half past never. They're warning that this could happen in a matter of months. No one seems certain as to how this would take place, as the options under consideration in Moscow reportedly vary from bad to worse here. These range from drone attacks, which have already become a thing in Central and Eastern Europe, up to full missile strikes or even limited numbers of Russian soldiers crossing the border. The aim of all of this, according to US intel, would be to both test NATO's resolve and to try to discourage Western support for Ukraine. As alarming and potentially even unrealistic as those options may sound, they're not landing in a vacuum. In the last year or so, Russia has shown shockingly little respect for a premise that has long been taken as almost a given. You don't f with NATO territory. Moscow's violations of the alliance's airspace roughly tripled over the course of 2025 alone, and a recent IISS report documented 144 suspicious drone incidents in more than a dozen NATO countries between August 2024 and this past February, a campaign all but certainly run by Russian military intelligence and utilizing tankers from their infamous sanctions-evading Shadow fleet as floating launch pads. And these violations weren't simply little mistakes where aircraft happened to stray across the borderline, or even situations where they intentionally briefly crossed as a catch-me-if-you-can sort of thing. No, these were in many cases full attacks, perhaps the most serious of which came last September when a swarm of over a dozen Russian military drones crossed into Polish airspace during a mass raid on Ukraine. Polish and other NATO forces scrambled their jets to intercept and shot down at least 4 of them. Remember, that part, we'll be coming back to it later. Romania, meanwhile, has been getting the worst of it on a sheer volume basis. Geographically cursed to be just across the Danube from Ukrainian ports that Russia bombs relentlessly, Bucharest has been the unwilling recipient of no fewer than 28 airspace breaches since the war began, and 2026 is on pace to shatter previous records. Back in May of this year,
I don't know if I've asked you this, but why are there both numbers and letters, and why are the letters not in order?
Civilian on NATO territory. And all of that comes on top of pretty much never-ending GPS jamming campaigns coming out of Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave that sits alongside Poland's northern border, as well as the November explosion that tore out part of a railway on the Warsaw-Lublin line, which coincidentally carries aid into Ukraine. Taken together, you start to really see the broader theme. As such, the US's latest warning likely landed in Warsaw with a "you don't say." All that said, though, whether the warnings found in this report actually become reality isn't a foregone conclusion. The Kremlin, for their part, has dismissed the whole thing as horror stories, although this should be taken with more than an industrial shovelful of salt, given that right up till February the 23rd, 2022, the Kremlin was insisting that any talk of a Russian invasion of Ukraine was all fake news. Even still, and even for Russia's standards of provocations, with Poland isn't a decision that anyone takes lightly, and for good reason. Warsaw has spent the past decade building a pretty damn impressive military force. They're a country spending roughly 4.5% of their GDP on defense, which is actually
already
outpacing
11?
the United States in relative terms. Over the last decade or so, its army has more than doubled, becoming the largest in Europe and the third largest in NATO after the United States and Turkey. So if the Kremlin really are thinking about going down this path, that has to be an overwhelming sense, not just that they can pull it off without risking all-out war with the Allies, but that they'd win something from it. And that is where things get dicey. Okay, so when it comes to potential targets for further Russian aggression, it's pretty clear that Poland is a foolish nation to place at the top of the list, and we want to be crystal clear about one thing here. Any outright Russian attack into Poland, which would need to come through Belarus in the first place, as there simply isn't a significant enough military presence in Kaliningrad, would be met with the full force of the Polish military. As such, the outcome isn't really in doubt. Poland would hand Moscow its duper on a plate. What is the subject of today's discussion is what happens in the grey zone, an incident small enough, deniable enough, or both, that the alliance's response becomes more of a judgment call rather than a no-brainer. This sort of escalation, which has become something of a second home for Russia in terms of how it approaches things in recent years, seems to be the only way that they would decide to do something against Warsaw. To understand where things would go from here, you have to understand that by design, Russia would be essentially aiming to create an operation that has no one good answer for those at the top of NATO. While the exact method of provocation remains uncertain, they broadly speaking share a similar characteristic. Moscow would stage something that it could plausibly deny. A handful of soldiers who just so happen to get lost and wander across the border, perhaps, or a crew framed as operating on a rescue mission for a helicopter that suffered from a malfunction, veered off course, and had to touch down across the border. Here the Kremlin is essentially gambling that Warsaw would assess that opening fire on Russian troops is simply too dangerous of a response to something that could be framed as an accident, and that they instead reach for a diplomatic off-ramp. Talks would take place, and after a period of time some form of agreement would be reached, by which time Russia would withdraw. And that right there is the win. At least for stage one, of course. Russia wouldn't be looking to set up a long-term occupation of Poland with a few soldiers, so their withdrawal would be pre-baked into the equation. No. Instead, the idea would be to demonstrate that Russian soldiers can walk onto NATO territory, stay there for however long they please, and leave when they decide they want to head home. And bonus points if Warsaw's initial plan was to open fire regardless, but other NATO capitals like Washington or Berlin pressured them not to. Now obviously, a tiny Russian incursion like that probably wouldn't mean white flags going up in Warsaw. It is, however, stage one complete. The damage is very much done, inherently lowering the bar for future such operations. And in the future, the Russians could instead target smaller, less militarily developed countries like those of the Baltics. Except now the Baltics would be staring down a Russian incursion with the precedent that Poland, of all places, was unwilling to fire on these guys, which is a hell of a precedent to break if you're a state the size of, say,
No,
Estonia.
I wasn't really talking
But
at all.
if such an underreaction essentially hands the Kremlin a win, going too far
I was
might
debating
also play into Putin's
how much longer I should stay on.
being done inside the country. Remember, this has already happened in Romania, and Warsaw basically says, "Kit, game on." Well, then there's the danger of overreacting. Let's say Polish forces wind up firing into Minsk or Kaliningrad. The second allows Putin to portray Russia as a victim of NATO aggression, while the first gives extra leverage to try and pull Belarus fully into the war. From there, it's not hard to see how things could spiral. Putin has already warned that any threat to Kaliningrad would mean large-scale war, and while the exclave doesn't hold a tremendous amount of Russian soldiers, it does have a significant munitions stockpile. An Iskander brigade with a dozen or so launchers with a range of better than 500 kilometers, several MiG-31s that have been parked there since 2022, S-400 interceptors, and the Baltic Fleet's HQ to boot. And unlike the war with Ukraine, which polling shows the vast majority of Russians are trying to ignore, a war started over Kaliningrad might give Putin the rally round the flag effect that he so clearly craves. Perhaps even enough so that he could order a full-scale mobilization without seeing riots in the streets. These are the clearest reasons why Russia might try such a high-risk strategy: to divide NATO and make the alliance look weak if it doesn't react, or to use an alliance reaction as a casus belli for something Putin desperately wants to do anyway, like drag Belarus into the Ukraine war or announce a general mobilization. The trouble for Moscow is that a plan this clever on paper still has to survive contact with the real world, and there are serious doubts about its ability to do so. So where's this leave Poland, the Baltics, and NATO more broadly? Well, certainly not a position that they'd like to be in. But things might also not be quite as gloomy for European security as they may seem. The plan we sketched out earlier may sound elaborate or perhaps even well thought out, but it certainly has some massive risks that come with it. Putin may have lasted longer by overseeing a grinding unsuccessful war than anyone in 2022 would have predicted, but there's remaining in power while sustaining a conflict in Ukraine, and then there's staying in power while fighting the whole of NATO. After all, there's a reason that things never came fully to a head between Washington and Moscow during the Cold War, and that's not a lesson that either side has entirely forgotten. Any operation to provoke Europe is inherently going to be based around making sure, one way or another, that the worst outcome doesn't happen. Indeed, this has been one of the reasons that analysts like Michael Kaufman, who is one of the world's top
I think I'm going to call it a night a little early.
That the costs of putting troops onto the Alliance's territory grossly outweigh anything that Moscow would stand.
One of these afternoons, we did that program stream
rather than in its favor. Hell, Kaliningrad
doing it this late at night always gets me tired.
In NATO, the exclave is completely surrounded, not just on land, but at sea as well. And speaking of Sweden and Finland, their accession into NATO in the first place traces back to another one of the Kremlin's brilliantly thought-out plans: the Ukraine invasion itself. In Moscow's eyes, NATO simply didn't have the unity that would be required to mount anything close to a sufficient response once Russian armor began flooding towards Kiev. In fact, it's now almost ironic how the theory of NATO a fracture under pressure from 2022 still seems to be guiding Russian thinking today. Not for nothing, the logic made some sense back then. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 was met with barely a slap on the wrist. The US had gone through a humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, and even European leaders themselves would have eyed on how to react to the growing threat to Ukraine in early 2022. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, for instance, couldn't even...
What do we got going tomorrow?
The Nord Stream 2 pipeline would be shut down if Russia invaded its neighbor. Similarly, there are plenty of indications to back up.
Don't worry about it. I'll check the calendar.
This time around. Donald Trump has been a long critic of Europe, arguing that the continent has not pulled its weight on defense, something that's front and center to today's conversation, especially as Washington continues to sour on the prospect of protecting Europe if things were to head south. The historically unprecedented set of concessions that Washington was willing to make to the Islamic Republic of Iran in exchange for reopening the Strait of Hormuz is another example that sends a very clear message that the US isn't willing to tough out longer-term conflicts. I mean, if the US bowed to Iran's demands after a war in which barely any Americans died, why wouldn't they bow to the demands of Russia when faced with a conflict that would likely kill hundreds of thousands?
Today's Monday, right?
And that deserves to be said, because it's almost certainly at the heart of conversations in the Kremlin as we speak. But again, such logic likely sounded good in 2022, and I mean, look where that got Putin. The other problem with extending 2022's logic through to today is that the NATO of today isn't the NATO of 2022, especially where the Eastern
What is
flank
today?
concerned. That drone attack that took place
today's Monday.
on Polish soil served as a mini test, and Warsaw handled it masterfully. Poland shot down what it could over its own soil, but went no further. There was no launching on either Kaliningrad or Belarus. In fact, it wasn't just Poland operating alone here either. Dutch F-35s, German Patriots, and an Italian surveillance plane were all involved in the
operation. You're saying for me to stream. Okay.
Not exactly. Of the 20 or so drones that entered Polish airspace, only 4 were actually down.
Sorry, I misread your message, and I was thinking, like, you're saying, tomorrow you have 10 to 5. It's Wednesday.
Hell, even scrambling F-16s and F-35s without firing missiles can cost a lot. That's inherently unsustainable, especially when you take into consideration just how many of these drones are down. Moscow has spent the last 3 years trying to perfect drone production, and they have a lot to show for it.
I'm gonna say goodbye.
By their buddies in Tehran. Now, does this mean that Moscow is definitely going to try something in the coming months? Not at all. It could be that we get to Christmas and the specter of Russia testing NATO has yet to materialize. But what we are saying is that the possibility is there, that there are multiple options the Kremlin has for testing where the red lines are, and that reacting with either too much or too little force in the heat of the moment could result in those red lines shifting. Maybe the Kremlin suddenly feels got a little extra wiggle room and it can test NATO even more. And if NATO fails the test, well, then capitals across the world, from Seoul and Tokyo in East Asia,
love
Canberra,
you too.
start wondering
Bye.
what US security guarantees are really worth. I mean, we've just seen how much use hosting US bases was for